Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something really deeply emotional and honestly universally relatable. We're going to take a close look at the nuanced and often completely unspoken choices a mentor makes in their final years about their legacy. Specifically, we're unpacking the really complex family dynamics that kick in when an elder decides to bypass their own child entirely and instead passes down a lifetime of knowledge to their grandchild. It's a truly fascinating look into human connection, empathy, and, what it actually means to leave something meaningful behind.
So here's the central mystery framing our whole discussion today. Why pass a legacy to a disabled grandson instead of a son? Traditionally, we'd absolutely expect a family's legacy, which in this specific case is a profound, lifelong understanding of animals and the natural world, to pass straight from parent to child, right? Father to son. But here, the grandfather makes this incredibly deliberate choice to just skip a generation. He chooses to spend his remaining time teaching his disabled grandson instead. At first glance, that might seem kind of unconventional. But as we're going to see through the source material, it's actually rooted in some incredibly deep wisdom.
Okay, so moving into section 1, the grandfather's choice. Let's explore the practical motivations behind this.
All right, let's really dive into this. The source material outlines a few highly practical reasons for this choice. First off, the grandfather noticed his grandson had a genuine, completely unforced passion for wildlife. The curiosity was just naturally there. Because of that, he knew the grandson would actually appreciate and preserve this knowledge. Plus, there's this really beautiful motivational layer here. He wanted to give his grandson confidence, a sense of purpose, and a truly meaningful role in the family. On the flip side, the grandfather saw that his own son already had a plate full of different interests and adult responsibilities. The son just wasn't as interested in learning about nature. Ultimately, the grandfather just wanted to ensure his life's knowledge didn't completely vanish when he passed.
That brings us to section 2, the empathy factor. Let's look at the emotional resonance behind this decision. Now, what's super interesting here is the stark contrast between these two individuals. The sources point out that elders often make this specific kind of choice based on emotional makeup. Think about it. On one hand, you've got the able-bodied son. The text notes he might be a bit impatient, cynical, or just hardened by the everyday grind of adult life. Totally normal, right? But on the other hand, you have the disabled grandson, who has this incredibly pure, patient, and empathetic spirit. The grandfather wasn't just looking for a walking encyclopedia to memorize animal facts. He was looking for someone with the emotional capacity to truly absorb the spirit of his teachings. And that brings us to this absolutely powerful phrase from the text, the perfect vessel. Because the grandson had that pure, patient spirit, the grandfather saw him as the perfect vessel to carry this family legacy forward. It had literally nothing to do with physical capability. It was entirely about emotional resonance and having the capacity to really nurture and protect that shared knowledge. The grandfather knew exactly who would cherish this connection to nature the absolute most.
Right, moving on to section 3, the missing last words and how we deal with that silence.
This quote really captures an immense amount of pain. But he did not give me his last words. When a beloved mentor leaves us without that big, cinematic, spoken goodbye, it can leave a deep sense of confusion. The grandson is left completely grappling with this silence. It's so painful to think about, and honestly, it's such a common human experience to feel like, well, without a deathbed declaration, the relationship is somehow left incomplete.
But let's look at the reasons behind that silence, just to better understand the reality of this situation. The sources offer us these very practical, circumstantial explanations. First, the grandfather simply might not have had the opportunity to speak before passing. Second, his declining health could have made it physically impossible to communicate in those final moments. And third, and this is just tragic, he might not even realize that the last time he saw his grandson was going to be the final time. The silence was dictated by the harsh, unpredictable realities of mortality, not by a lack of love. Seriously, it wasn't because he didn't care.
Let's pivot to section 4, actions over words. We're looking at the profound gift here. And this perfectly illustrates the core philosophy we need to wrap our heads around. Time spent teaching is vastly greater than a final speech. The source material makes it clear that the grandfather believed all those hours, days, and years spent teaching his grandson about wildlife were way, way more important than any singular final sentence could ever be. He didn't wait around for his deathbed to impart his wisdom. Actually, he lived his legacy alongside his grandson, day in and day out,
every single time they went out to observe nature together.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the true legacy, and what it means to inherit meaning.
So, the crucial takeaway is this completely reframed definition of what is left behind. A legacy is not some dramatic final speech you'd see in a movie. A true legacy is the accumulated lessons, the shared memories of nature, and the dedicated time spent together. It's a living, breathing inheritance that outlives a person. The grandfather's legacy was successfully transferred through patience, empathy, and a shared passion over an entire lifetime. And that far, far outweighs the need for a few final spoken words.
And honestly, for anyone tuning in who has experienced this kind of loss, this is probably the most important thing to take away from our source material today. Not receiving someone's last words absolutely does not mean you are less important to them. The silence at the very end doesn't invalidate the years of profound connection, the teaching, and the love that came before it. It just doesn't.
As the source text so beautifully puts it, the lessons they shared during their life become their real legacy. This is the ultimate cathartic realization for the grandson. All those memories of the animals, the specific species, those quiet little moments out in nature. That is exactly what his grandfather wanted to leave behind. He completely succeeded in passing on his life's work to the perfect vessel, ensuring that even without a formal goodbye, his knowledge is going to echo for generations. To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If actions truly speak louder than final words, what living legacy are you carrying forward right now? Think about the unspoken lessons, the patience, and the passions that your own mentors have poured into you over the years. Because at the end of the day, that is what remains. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredibly beautiful dynamic today. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and I'll catch you in the next one.